Hello everyone, welcome to Judge's Corner. This is Judge Matthew Sabaugh, and welcome to another episode. Today's episode is going to feature the Resolution Center Executive Director, Craig Pappas. Craig, welcome to Judge's Corner.
Thanks for having me.
I'm really glad that you're here today, and what I hope that the viewers will learn after today's episode is what the Resolution Center is and what type of services you offer the community, and really what resolution and mediation means.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be able to talk about it because a lot of folks don't know exactly what mediation is or have a lot of assumptions about what it is. So I'll be happy to talk with you about mediation at the Resolution Center.
Thanks. The first question I have for you is, what is the Resolution Center?
The Resolution Center is a nonprofit agency. We've been in Macomb County for about 20 years now. Our main office is in downtown Mount Clemens, and we are one of 20 community mediation centers in the state of Michigan that are partially funded through the Michigan Supreme Court to provide folks in Macomb County the opportunity to resolve disputes through a non-confrontational, confidential, informal process, which is mediation. So in a nutshell, we provide folks, businesses, individuals the opportunity to participate in the mediation process to resolve disputes. We have several different programs ranging from court programs to community programs. We work actually with some schools here in Warren with youth for peer mediation and anti-bullying programs as well.
What is a typical type of case that's handled through mediation?
That's a hard question to answer because nothing seems typical when it comes to conflict. But mostly it would be the equivalent to like a civil lawsuit. Someone has a problem with a business. Someone has a problem with an individual. Usually it's over a product or a service that wasn't provided or performed correctly. Some of the more traditional community type problems would be maybe a problem with a landlord or a tenant. Maybe a tenant not paying their rent or a landlord not providing services like a leaky roof or heat or something along those lines. Some of the more difficult problems that we see are neighbor-to-neighbor problems. Folks that are in conflict with a neighbor over a property line dispute, a tree hanging over, kids playing too late, especially this time of the year, playing basketball too late and it's noisy. Just an array of things that could happen. We do some programs that involve parenting time and disputes over child rearing for folks who live apart, either divorced or were never married, but have kids together. And those can be pretty contentious issues, as you can imagine.
That's a big list of different types of cases.
And that's just a little list, actually.
How does a case get to the Resolution Center?
Anybody that lives in Macomb County can call our office. We have a toll-free number, which is 1-800-8-RESOLVE. Pretty easy number to remember. And can contact one of our case managers to talk about their problem, to see if it's appropriate for mediation. What we would do at that time is collect a little information, and we would contact the other side and explain the benefits to them. What the alternatives would be. A lot of times the alternatives would be to come to the court here in Warren, or the court where you're at, file a small claims case, sometimes a personal protection order up at the circuit court. We go through all the different alternatives to not participating or at least trying mediation with that other side to convince them that it's a good thing to do. At that time we schedule it at a time that's convenient for them.
So both parties have to agree to have their case mediated by the Resolution Center?
If it's not ordered by a judge. We get a fair number of cases ordered by judges like yourself, other judges in district courts throughout the county, judges at the circuit court level. And in that instance, then they, if they didn't participate, they wouldn't be complying with a court order. So there are a fair number of instances where folks would be required to participate in mediation. That doesn't mean that they're required to settle their dispute. That just means they're required to participate in that process.
So kind of lay out for me, Craig, what happens if both parties agree to have their case heard by a mediator at the Resolution Center? What takes place at the actual mediation?
Our mediators aren't there to evaluate a case and say what they think should happen. They're not there to provide legal advice. They're there to facilitate a difficult discussion, help the parties talk about some practical outcomes, and sometimes talk to the parties privately to have some of those realistic discussions. But a lot of times, people want to vent. They need to vent. They need to get these issues off their chest. Okay, but conflict creates opportunities, and we help point those out. A lot of people don't see those opportunities when they're in conflict. So each party will have an opportunity to sit. A mediation requires that the parties sit face to face. Usually, we use 2 mediators, sometimes 1, and the parties will have an opportunity to tell their side of the story. And then our mediators are there to help generate some options, point out the benefits, test the realities of what they're possibly coming up with for solutions. And ultimately, through this discussion and this back and forth at the mediation table, the goal is to come up with a written agreement, something that they came up with, that we help craft in a wordsmith type way. So it's something that they're going to follow through with, because they came up with it. We're not saying, we think you should do this, we think you should do that. We're going to help them get to that point.
So a successful mediation doesn't mean that the mediator decides what the outcome is. A successful mediation is both parties agreeing to the terms of the resolution itself?
Absolutely. And they themselves coming up with what that solution might be. I gave an example earlier. It may be kids playing late, 10 o'clock at night playing basketball with maybe a neighbor who doesn't appreciate it being so loud, that maybe they'll come to a happy medium and come up with a time in which the kids will stop playing. Maybe they'll agree on who's going to come get the basketball if it comes over in my yard. It becomes an issue. For you and I, they might not seem like big issues, but for people who are dealing with these things every day, that's all. I talk to them on the phone all the time, and it really starts to wear on people. It starts to dominate the way they think all day when they're in a dispute. So, coming in a calm, mature atmosphere at our office, versus out on the driveway yelling back and forth at each other, they can have this practical discussion with our mediators. And as me not being involved in the dispute, we can bring a different perspective, a neutral perspective, one that doesn't favor this neighbor or favor that neighbor or favor the business versus the person that bought a product from a business, depending on what the dispute is. So yeah, ultimately the parties are the ones that come up with the solution.
There's some similarities to the court process, because in mediation each party has the opportunity to be heard by the other party, but in this case they fashion the agreement. It sounds a lot better for some parties to have more of a say in it at mediation, rather than to take your case to court and ultimately have the judge decide what the ruling is.
And we do a fair number of cases that come to the courts, come to mediation before a judge will hear them. And I actually can physically see the relief on people's faces and their body language, because a lot of people just are intimidated by court. They're not familiar with it. They don't want to say the wrong thing. They don't, they can't afford to get legal advice. So coming into mediation is a lot more informal. You're going to get in, you're going to get out. You're going to feel like you're part of the process. And and there is research that was done and published by the State Court Administrative Office that showed that folks who craft their own agreements are more likely to fulfill their agreements versus someone imposing an agreement on. You go to court, someone wins, someone loses. I mean, that's just the reality of it. I know, a lot of judges try to make it a win-win or a lose-lose, but mediation is, by definition and by design, designed to be a win-win. Try to satisfy everyone's needs and fashion an agreement that everyone can live with.
Craig, is there a cost to have your case mediated by the Resolution Center?
We do charge a nominal administrative cost if you want to open up a case at the Resolution Center. However, we would never deny anybody an opportunity to be able to utilize mediation. And in fact, the state statute that created mediation says that if someone is unable to pay and demonstrates inability to pay, that we will waive that fee. So we would never bar anybody from having access to being able to resolve a dispute.
Are the parties able to have their attorneys present with them if they have attorneys?
Absolutely. We would certainly never deny anybody the opportunity, and in fact, for the most part, most of the cases we have that have attorneys there, they're very helpful. They're there. They want to get their client's case resolved, and they want to be able to ensure that their client's getting a fair shake in terms of the way the mediation turns out. So, yeah, attorneys are there. We want the parties to be actively participating. We don't want the attorney speaking on behalf of them. So we want everyone at the table involved in the discussion and to make it a productive discussion. So, yeah, attorneys are very helpful. In fact, probably a quarter of our mediators that mediate for us are attorneys, either in practice or by education.
How many mediators do you have that you use?
One important thing I wanted to point out before I tell you how many we have is that all of our mediators are community volunteers. They are professionally trained and are approved through the Michigan Supreme Court through a mediation training. And like I mentioned, some of them are attorneys, some of them are business owners, some of them are educators, retirees. Any professional discipline you could possibly think of is probably represented in the about 100 mediators that are on our roster. And some of them mediate 2 or 3 times a week, some of them mediate 2 or 3 times a month, some of them 2 or 3 times a year. It all depends on how their availability shakes out throughout the year. But we got a great group of people. So, as an individual coming into mediation, they're likely going to be able to identify with the mediator. It's not going to be, someone who's, a judge or someone who's going to, question, why they're there. It's someone that could be from their neighborhood or someone that they can identify with. So I think that gives it a better sense of comfort for people coming to mediation.
Well, we've had a unique relationship between the 37th District Court and the Resolution Center. Yeah. I'd like to talk more about that after the break. Thanks very much for being here. Craig Pappas, Executive Director of the Resolution Center.
Thank you.
We'll be right back after this.
Can you consent with me? Imagine what you'd see if every child had a book to read.
So the mission is for us to get a book to each and every child. So let's join hands, book people unite.
Unearth hidden passion.
Come on, we'll have a good time. One book could be the first kind of thing. Helps to change a life. Book people unite.
Read to a child today and spark a lifetime of ambition.
Welcome back to Judge's Corner. This is Judge Sabaugh, and I'm here again with Craig Pappas from the Resolution Center. Craig, I wanted to pick up where we left off. Here in the 37th District Court, we have a unique relationship with the Resolution Center involving small claims cases. Can you talk a little bit about the history of that?
Sure. When an individual comes to file a small claims case here at the District Court in Warren, upon both parties being served, they will receive a notice to appear for mediation. This court, like a lot of other courts that have followed this court, this program's been in place since 1999, and I know a lot of courts in the county and even around the state have used this court as a model to duplicate in their own jurisdictions. So the folks, upon receiving that notice, before a case would be heard by yourself or one of the other judges here at the court, they will go through mediation. Hopefully, so a lot of the benefits that I talked about earlier can be applied by them coming up with a solution that's going to work best for them. A lot of small claims cases, folks who are being sued as the defendant, they know they owe the money, or they owe perhaps something from what they're being sued, and it's just they don't have it. I mean, the reality is they just don't have it. So coming in and sitting down with one of our mediators and coming up with a plan to figure out how that money can be paid back in a realistic fashion is something that our mediators will go through. And a lot of times it's a back and forth. It's a really practical discussion. We're realistic. We know not 100% of small claims cases are going to get settled. So when they don't, they will then be referred back to the referring judge, whether that's yourself or one of the other judges, and the parties will come back and have their formal hearing, in which at that time it's a final decision. So we've been doing, like I said, we've been doing that since 1999. We're here every other Wednesday at the court. Usually we bring about 6 of our mediators on site right here, so the folks don't have to go to our office up in Mount Clemens to do their small claims cases. And it's a fairly successful program. I think about 60% of the cases that go through small claims mediation never have to be heard by a judge. So that's freeing up your time for some of the more higher end cases and some of the criminal stuff and all the other stuff that the judges here at the 37th District Court got to do. I know this is one of the busier courts in the whole state of Michigan.
I know, and we have seen an increase in the number of small claims cases since the legislature increased the limit up to 5,000. So it really is a benefit to unclutter the dockets here when cases get resolved.
Yeah, and that number is going to continue to go up. As of this time last year, it was only the most you could sue for was $3,000. So now it's up to $5,000, and I think by 2016 it's going to be up all the way up to $7,500. So I think you're going to continue to see that number grow. I'm glad you brought that point up. There are a fair number of people who do sue for more than $5,000, and that would be a general civil case. And the reality is a lot of times people can't afford attorneys, but the judges do recognize that that they're still allowed and still entitled to have a mediation. So I know yourself and some of the other judges here, when they recognize a case that's beyond the small claims limit, they'll still give them that opportunity to participate in mediation, and we've been seeing a fair number of those. And those we'll even set up here, here at the court, so folks don't have to come up to Mount Clemens. It doesn't make sense for everyone that's here in Warren that's involved in the lawsuit to drive up there when we can, one person can come here. So those have become very appropriate. I like to say appropriate cases for mediation, because usually the parties know each other. They're going to have some type of ongoing relationship, whether it's family, neighbors, business partners, business to business. It makes sense to kind of bring the adversary nature of the dispute to a halt and talk practically about what's going on.
So when the case is referred to the mediation, or in the case we have here, the small claims case goes right away, it gets set up for that conference.
Right.
Is that the same process that would occur even back at your Mount Clemens location?
Absolutely. So the parties come, they go downstairs here at the court, they check in. Once both parties are here, we'll assign the case to one of the mediators that are here on site. Mediators will call the parties in and sit them down, explain the ground rules of mediation, explain that it's confidential, that we're not going to send you a report if it doesn't get settled. As you know, the only thing that we would tell you if the case didn't settle in the mediation is it didn't settle. We don't send a report or think, say this person's right, this person's wrong, and we explain all that to the parties, so they have a level of comfort that they can speak freely and make offers and negotiate back and forth without the fear of that being a repercussion if that does go back to court or goes to court. And we tell people, you're not giving up any of your legal rights. By participating in this mediation, if you don't feel comfortable with what offers are being made to you, we can set it for a formal hearing, and you'll go in front of one of the judges. And so I think that gives people a sense of comfort, and they appreciate that.
Thanks, Craig. Now, I know the Resolution Center does a lot of work to promote people peaceably resolving their disagreements. Sure. And I know you've done a lot of work right here in our community at the Fitzgerald Schools.
Absolutely.
Could you talk about what programs occurring there?
Absolutely. In addition to Fitzgerald, and we also have done a couple years worth of work at Lincoln High School in terms of providing the students there with some conflict resolution skills. And so we've had the opportunity to train several students as peer mediators. And these students will do the same type of mediation that I've been talking to you about today for disputes between their peers, students to students, whether they're rumors and gossip. A lot of disputes get started on social media sites and the like, and a lot of he said, she said, and sometimes those things can escalate into greater things. So I know just this past year between those two schools we did over 400 mediations that the students themselves did. Now, we also have an adult facilitator to do some of what we call like the higher end disputes. Those would be physical altercations or fights, where traditionally a vice principal or a principal would suspend kids. But they're finding that that's kicking kids out of school. It's not resolving disputes. It's not making things better between kids. In fact, sometimes it's making it worse because you're this big buildup when they come back. What's going to happen when those two kids come back from their suspension? And the reality is when kids are out of school, they're not in class. So these two schools, in addition to some other schools in the county, have taken a different approach and are using a process called restorative justice, which brings all of the parties together, brings their families or supporters together to sit down and talk about, what led up to this? How has this affected everybody? And bottom line, what can we do to make this thing better? What can we do to make things right between you guys? And sometimes it can be something simple. Sometimes it's something that's built up over the years since they were in junior high. But we've done quite a few of those cases, and we're going to continue on with Fitzgerald going into next school year. And the administration and all the folks at Fitzgerald High School have been incredibly supportive of this program. So we're excited to continue to have one of our staff people there and continue to, we're also going to be starting a mentor program for kids coming in from the middle school that, sort of a little intimidated, a little lost, and kind of pair them up with a senior or junior to help ease that transition into high school.
I think that's just a great thing. I think that's gonna affect these kids now to stop them from getting in fights and getting thrown out of school. But also, like you said, conflict resolution, that's a skill that's going to benefit them for the rest of their lives. You have to deal with conflict. All of us do when we're kids and when we become adults, and it's how you manage that in a responsible way.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's really, I think that's a good thing for our community that you're doing
yeah,
that.
and we're fortunate for the Michigan Department of Education to be able to fund some of this, and their ultimate goal is they want to get kids to graduate. So unfortunately, graduation rates aren't where we want them to be, and they're big supporters of let's keep kids in school. We know they're going to have conflicts. Let's give them some skills for resolving those conflicts so they can, increase their academic levels.
One of the things that I've often heard said by teachers is that kids, especially middle schoolers and high schoolers, their peer group, the judgment of their peer group is really the most important thing to them. Absolutely. They may not listen to their teachers or their parents, but if a group of students or a peer mediator decides something, they're more likely to listen to that.
And
Are you seeing that?
Absolutely. And that's one of the first things that we caution the administrators or the peer mediation team at the school, the adult peer mediation team that's putting the whole program together. They always want to get the honor students, the kids who are in leadership positions, or the popular kids, and we say, hold on, we want everyone in this school represented. Because if I'm in one peer group and it's always just this other peer group that's mediating my dispute, I don't feel comfortable talking with them about my problem. But if it's somebody that I can relate to and that looks like me, talks like me, acts like me, I'm going to open up and I'm going to feel more comfortable. And so absolutely, we do a pretty intensive screening process when we choose who the peer mediators are that are going to get trained. And they go through 24 hours worth of training. We split it up over 3 days to train these students at the school to do these, and it's a certified program that's recognized by
something
the United.
they could put on their resume or college application. Even.
They take you'd be surprised. They take incredible pride in being a peer mediator. Some of these schools, they have T-shirts and they have a club. They elect a president, a vice president of the peer mediation group, and it's a big deal. And for a lot of these peer mediators, it gives them an identity. It gives them something, like you said, to put on their resume or to put on their college application. And I think it's definitely important role as a peacekeeper in their school that they're doing.
Good. Now, another segment of the population that I know you're helping is the elder population. Mm-hmm. And could you talk a little bit about some of these cases involving elderly persons and their families?
Sure. Unfortunately, we're looking at the flip end of what we were just talking about. When folks, we see a fair number of folks who they need a guardian, someone to manage their finances, their health, and to oversee those types of matters. And when you go to court, sometimes someone will contest that guardianship. So we try to hopefully maybe avoid having to get to the point where we're getting siblings arguing in court over who's going to take care of mom's checkbook, who's going to take her to the hospital, where she should live, where she, whether she should continue to drive. And a lot of times we'll include the alleged guardian in a mediation. Get these family members together, sit down, and have a realistic discussion about these issues, because they usually turn into World War IIIs within families. These family battles, and it becomes accusatory and bringing up things from 20 years ago. Mom always liked you more. That's why you want to take care of her checkbook. And so I think getting folks to sit down and feel comfortable not doing this in a courtroom and airing their family dirty laundry, so to speak.
And everything in the Resolution Center is that confidential?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's one of the hallmark features of mediation, is the confidentiality. I think people really take a deep breath when they realize we're not sending a report to a judge. We're not sending a report to anybody. The only time we would breach confidentiality is if there's an allegation of child or elder abuse. Other than that, unless there's an imminent threat, we'll end the mediation. So I think getting families together to have these discussions about care and taking care of a lot of times we like to say allegedly incapacitated adult. Sometimes that means onset of dementia or Alzheimer's, and they do need to come up with a plan. And a lot of times it's simple, but it's on paper. Everyone came up with it. Everyone can put it on their refrigerator. Okay, it's my turn to go over and cut mom's grass this week, or
it's good to know
my brother's going over
to
take mom grocery shopping this week, and I know that he's going to be there, and I can send him a text or follow up with him. So,
well, very good.
It's a comfortable program, and it's a comfortable way for folks to do that.
Well, Craig, I hope this gave our viewers a good introduction of the Resolution Center. And I always say to the viewers, the doors of the courtroom are open to everyone. I hope you don't mind me saying also the doors of the Resolution are another option for community members, citizens to air their grievances, or at least try to come to a resolution with any dispute that they may have. So I think this is a great resource for our community. Thanks you very much for being my guest.
Thank you.
That's been another edition of Judge's Corner. I'm Judge Sabaugh. Thank you very much.